So your customers in procurement are going to be your internal stakeholder, right? So the requester of what they need. It's also your suppliers. So like even being respectful and not calling them vendors, like that a vendor is an old technology, a vendor is a vending machine. Your suppliers are your customers. Can they reach you? Can they interact with you? Is it hard to do business with you? Are you mean to them? Do you squeeze them year over year just for savings and don't care about a partnership?
Yeah.
Those types of things, right? And then your third customer is each other in procurement, right? So like within your own house, do you treat each other well and do you help each other out? Somebody's out, do you take over their projects? Do you share templates? Do you have meetings where you say, hey, I can see how we can improve efficiencies and processes? So those for me it's like this triangle of customers.
Jim Colangelo.
Hey.
Thanks for joining us. Super excited to have you. I think you have a really unique point of view around procurement, having worked at various different, companies and in the public sector. So we'll talk about that, but you were at JetBlue for a minute, among other places. And then you've been Chief Procurement Officer for the state of Michigan.
Yep.
And doing a lot of things in procurement in Wayne County. For those that don't know, Wayne County is the largest county in Michigan,
yes,
population-wise, and is where Detroit is.
Yes,
so
that's right.
Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So if I recall correctly, your procurement career began at Federal Mogul, automotive company. I think if I recall correctly, like one of the people you worked with said you had a great IT brain.
Yeah.
They can teach you, not P brain, but an IT brain.
A little bit of both.
They said that they can teach you the procurement stuff. So that was, I don't know how many years ago that was, but what has stayed the same in your view? Like walk us through that 20-year journey and what do you take with you today that you learned way back then? Sure.
Yeah. So it was 20 years ago. So my first job and hobbies as a kid was all related to computers and IT. I was building my own computer when I was, before I got my driver's license, which then that took over all my interests. But I really love computers and IT, so I had a job doing that kind of work, and I was exposed to procurement, while I was working in IT at Federal Mogul.
Yeah.
And I expressed some interest in kind of that work that was done, and the director of the IT procurement area at that time, she was phenomenal, and still is. She's still with us, right? But she said, "Hey, if you really want to be in procurement, I'll teach you and mentor you in the procurement space. I would like to use your IT expertise, because you can speak the language of the customer, right?" So. And that's a huge focus for me, and always has been a big focus for me is the customer and customer experience, and tying into JetBlue a little bit, and we can get into that later on, is the importance of the customer experience and what does that mean. So at Federal Mogul, it meant that I could talk to IT and they could talk to me and I understood everything they were saying and what they needed, and I could get them what they wanted in a timely manner, right?
So in your world, the customer, just so I'm clear, you think of that as like the IT org that you're supporting, or the business users that you're supporting. Those are procurement's customers. Is that fair?
Procurement's customers, I think that's a great question. And for me, it's, think of that triangle of like people, process, technology, right? Everyone talks about transformation, and we can talk about that some more too. But there's also a triangle of customer, right? So your customers in procurement are going to be your internal stakeholder, right? So the requester of what they need.
Yeah.
It's also your suppliers, right? So like even being respectful and not calling them vendors, like that a vendor is an old technology, a vendor is a vending machine.
Yeah.
So your suppliers are your customers. Can they reach you? Can they interact with you? Is it hard to do business with you? Are you mean to them? Do you squeeze them year over year just for savings and don't care about a partnership?
Yeah.
Those types of things, right? And then your third customer is each other in procurement, right? So like within your own house, do you treat each other well and do you help each other out? Somebody's out, do you take over their projects? Do you share templates? Do you have meetings where you say, hey, I can see how we can improve efficiencies and processes? Those for me it's like this triangle of customers. Right?
Yeah, and you're making all three of those different constituencies happy. You need all those people to be on your team.
You cannot function without them.
At the end of the day, I love that frame of reference. So in terms of the lessons that you've learned one story that you shared in the past was at JetBlue, like how much like operations was essential there.
Yeah.
You know, you have a 5-minute delay in the morning somewhere, and that
Right.
cascades throughout the full day.
That's right.
It creates a real nightmare. So, you know, you need things on time. There can't be shortages. How did that shape you?
It really hammered home a couple things. One, how important customer service and experience is overall in your organization. So like at the state of Michigan, that was our philosophy and our guiding principles always was customer service.
Yeah.
And at JetBlue it was the same. And I'm sure it still is the same. It's been 10 years since I've worked there, but I'm sure that it has not changed. And everything that you do has a cascading effect on the company, but also on the people that consume whatever it is that you're either producing or providing as a service.
Yeah.
And it's extremely important. And at JetBlue specifically, we got a real sense of what we did affected other people deeply in terms of getting home to their families, getting to a very important meeting, transporting an animal or pets and things. Like all of that stuff was extremely important. And what we did, even though it was not maybe glamorous in terms of buying de-icing fluid or making sure that the tractors that push the planes back, or the tow bars that hook up to the front landing gear that push a plane back, that hooks to the tractor, like making sure all of that's in place and ready to go is not glamorous. But without that,
it all breaks down.
It all breaks down.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we had a real good sense of that, and the leadership there at the time really imparted that on us, and I really took that with me everywhere I go.
Yeah, and I think it's such an interesting perspective because it's probably one of the highest pressure. Like there's a lot. I'm sure there's maybe I don't know. There's a lot of places that are high pressure, but in terms of like the implications of delays causing cascades, like it's hard to beat that, I think, in terms of how important it is.
Yeah.
But so now one thing that I think is kind of out there is people talk about public sector procurement.
Yeah.
And I think the general consensus is that it's slow, that it's arcane, it's hard to navigate, it feels like you're feeling your way through a labyrinth. How do you, having worked in both public and private, what do you think is the reality between those two? Like, do you think public sector is harder to navigate?
It depends on the company. So I've seen some, private sector companies do procurement pretty well. Government entities, though, generally, it is slower. Is it more archaic? Not necessarily. I think in the private sector, things that I've noticed are a lot of projects get started and then just die.
Yeah.
You might have a lot of leadership change and other things in private sector more than you do in public. So it's kind of at the whim of whoever's in charge, and so you'll have folks putting in a ton of work on something that a week later, the plug gets pulled, right? In the public sector, you don't really have a lot of that. Things do get seen through to the end, but it does take longer.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And as far as the archaicness goes, I think that's kind of going away. The reality is most public sector entities are on modern platforms now. 10 years ago, you would say that, public sector, 15 years ago, the public sector needs massive overhauls, and procurement transformation was like the big thing in public sector. And I think it's time to, if someone hasn't already, it's time to move away from that.
Revisit that. Yeah.
Because we're not necessarily in transformation mode, I don't think, in the public sector, not at the state level.
And when you say that, are you speaking from like an underlying technology and process point of view primarily?
Yes, technology and process. From a personnel point of view, it is a little bit different. Public sector it's a little bit tougher to get the pay scale, where the private sector pays, and that is a detriment to hiring.
Yeah,
I'd say
you have to sell the mission and the vision hard.
For sure, for sure. And I can say wholeheartedly and with honesty that working in the public sector really is a privilege, and there is an underlying kind of enjoyment to it. There's a satisfaction. There's an inner, like, what I'm doing really matters.
Yeah.
When you work for a company, And let's say when I worked for Federal Mogul, which doesn't really exist anymore, so I don't mind saying what I say. But when you're just shooting parts out the door, there's, what are you really doing there? But when you're in public sector, you're really you're affecting people's lives.
Totally.
You're making parks better. You are making health and human services better. You're helping your law enforcement, parks enforcement, and parks, recreation related activities. When I was at the state, we used to say we bought everything from fish to helicopters, and it was true. We did. We buy little tiny fish to help the DNR, feed ponds. And every once in a while we buy us aircraft for, state police and so on.
Totally. And that's one of the things in starting Pursuit I love as well, because I get to be part of that service aspect too. My parents are both public school teachers, so grew up with that in the water. Could you unpack, I want to go a little deeper into the point that you made around public sector procurement being slower.
Sure.
Why? What's causing that?
A big part of it is the law and or policy. Sometimes the policy is the law in most cases. So there'll be ordinances or different acts, like Act 431 is what the state of Michigan uses for its overarching kind of governance of procurement. So it's archaic in that a lot of those laws were written a long time ago. And also they were amended in a reactionary way. Meaning some kind of fraud may have taken place or something untoward, and so someone's like, well, we need to have a law so the X never happens again. And that's usually an overreaction to what has happened. But then what it does downstream is create a lot of process and procedure and paperwork that has to be kind of jumped through in order to satisfy the requirements of the law. So that part of it, and then approvals and things so that can take a really long time. So it's not necessarily like in a company where you say, okay, I got this contract, we're going to run it through approval, it's going to go to the director, vice president, CFO, signed off, done, right? Well, we have all those things in government, and they may have different names, but generally those roles exist in some way or another. But then it will go to some committees, sometimes another governing body of elected officials, and that can take time. And there's not really much you can do about that. I mean, people want to have their say, they want to have their review, they're entitled to it by law. But for a small company, that can be really painful, right? So let's say you go through the procurement process, and it may take, we'll call it 2.5 months, maybe 3 months by the time a bid hits the street to when it gets scored and awarded to your company. Right? But you may have another tail of a few months of review, and you may get hauled in to answer some questions like, hey, tell us about your company by those legislative officials, right? So
then you got to cut the PO.
And
then you got to get paid. So there could be, 3-month RFP cycle, a couple months of reviews, 60-day payment terms. And now you're looking at you had to make 9 months of payroll.
Correct. And it's hard to ramp up. So when you look at services like road work or professional services, like say you're looking to add some bodies to a project, and so this company needs to hire, say, 10 people to satisfy the work that needs to be done. Well, they have to hire those 10 people and then put them on ice for 3-4 months and eat that.
That's
money,
tough,
right? That's really tough.
So
it's hard to do business sometimes, but the upside of that usually is once you've kind of gone through that and you're in. A government does have the ability and the need to find good partners and keep them long term. There is in most cases thresholds that whether it's a time or a dollar threshold that things have to be rebid. So you might go 5 years, 8 years with an agreement, but at some point you'll face the scrutiny of another bid.
Do you find that, just on that one specific point, do you find that is that as part of the Act 431 where that's stipulated, or is that part of some city ordinance or county?
It could be both.
It could be either.
It could be in policy, it could be in law. I think it's good practice. This is where a lot of companies, private sector companies fall down, is they don't manage their vendors as well
Yeah.
as the public sector does.
Yeah.
You know, I view that a little bit as a positive in terms of, let's say every 5 years or every 8 years, you've got to put a company out to bid. Well, yeah, put them out in the street and like prove to us that you're still competitive. Not that we don't want to partner with you. We'll partner with you again for 5+3 years, whatever it may be. But I've seen in the private sector that they'll be with a company for 20 years. And that's nice, but they may be, you know, spending inordinate amount of money, or the scope may have crept so far that they're not even doing anything remotely the same as what they did when they started. So some of that oversight can be a real positive, especially when you're talking about spending taxpayer dollars. Right. So this goes back a little bit to what I was saying about the responsibility and the joy a little bit of working in the public sector. It's not just your money; it's mine too.
Totally.
Right. So like as a public servant, it's your
kids, you know, it's your parents.
That's right.
Right.
So, you know, being in procurement in the public sector is you're stewards of this money, and it's really up to us to neutrally make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean, I'll go a little bit further, which doesn't mean buying the cheapest thing either. Right. It means what we
best
call
value.
In the space best value.
Yeah.
Right. In procurement, it's price plus other factors.
Yeah. There's so much gold in what you just said, and I want to try to double click on a couple of things. So, like just on the most recent thing you said, best value versus lowest bid.
Yeah.
What's the like for folks that aren't familiar with that? Like, how common are those two things? Do you see like at different levels of government? Do you find that like states are more aligned to best value, whereas local are probably more low bid? Like any patterns in how that works? And
I don't think so. I think in a very immature organization, you're going to be in low bid, but in any big government space, state and local, like say Wayne County, they use best value, state uses best value. Like these are big entities, right? And they know better than to just go low bid. Now there are it's more category based than it is entity based. So category being like a commodity.
Right.
Road salt,
you could do,
you're going low bid, right? And so, but when you're talking about
services,
you're going best value. Or things like, a great example I like to use is, say we're buying bulletproof vests for the state police. Right? You might have 2-3 companies that make those. Do you want to buy the cheapest one?
Right.
For our state troopers? Like, I don't think so.
Or you want to buy the one that stops a bullet. Yeah.
I want the ones that they want.
Yeah.
Right. So like they tell me which ones they want.
Right.
I'll try to get the best price I can for them.
Yeah.
But whatever the price is, we're gonna work through that.
Fascinating. Okay, so I just want to kind of summarize and play back what I heard on the kind of the differences between public and private. I think I heard 2 key differences. One is that in public sector there are more process steps.
Yes.
Largely because of the issues that you discussed over time that get like put into law. And in a company, you might be able to revisit that more easily and say like, no, let's clear out some of these hoops that we have to jump through. But in the public sector, probably harder to do that, right?
Yes.
So there are more steps.
Yes.
Number 1, okay. Number 2, there are more reviews and approvals.
Yes.
As someone selling into government, what's the mindset someone should have? Should they view those things as, I need to like map the process and then navigate it as smoothly and efficiently as I can? Mm-hmm. And is there no way to like jump the process? I mean, obviously there's like emergency procurement, that's not exactly what I'm talking about, but like, is it the case where the process is the process, or is there like arguments to be made where like, well, in this case, we don't need to follow these 10 steps or 3 steps. Is it, you know what I'm saying? Like, can you shorten the cycle at all?
No. You can't.
That's a simple, good, clear answer.
I think it's best for you to understand the cycle, and be patient, and know what you're getting into. And it's okay to ask the questions, right? So like if you came to Wayne County or the state of Michigan and you said, hey, I'm going to respond to this bid, like what do you think the award date might be? Now on those bids, there's generally a time schedule on them, so you can tell. And we build that time in. So I would say it's a long tail, and so just be ready for that. There's not really like you said, other than an emergency procurement, you're not jumping the process.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
And then you said, maybe to encapsulate that idea, I've heard you say before that the good news is that it's formulaic.
Yes.
The bad news is everyone has their own formula.
That's right. Yeah. So when we had talked previously, it was there's definitely every entity has a formula of what you're going to do to respond to a bid. But yeah, they are all different.
Yeah.
So familiarize yourself as much as you can with the process. Ask the questions. It's okay to ask questions. At the other end of those emails are human beings.
Yep.
And they want to help you, and they'll get you through the process. But also be detail oriented. You know, in your responses, I can't tell you how many times we meaning whatever entity I was working for at the time or my staff, have rejected bids because they came in 1 minute late, or they were missing a signature on a cover page, or some kind of certification that you're a Michigan-based business, or whatever it might be. Sign those documents, dot those I's and cross those T's. Get that in early, right? If not early, you're late. So those things are heartbreaking, right? Because you're like, I'm sorry you had trouble with your computer,
right?
And you couldn't get it in on time, but I can't let you in at 4:01 because everyone else got in at 3:45.
Yeah.
You're out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And we have to do that because we are, a public entity.
Yeah.
Right. We have to be fair across the board.
Yeah, totally. And I do think as time marches on with AI, those sort of like what I'll call clerical details should be easier and easier to manage.
Totally.
Right.
Yep.
So that is one good news story. Another one that I wanted to ask you about was how should folks think about what goes to RFP versus what doesn't need to go to RFP? I mean, technically, if my facts are correct, you mentioned procurement thresholds. So like there are thresholds above which if it's 50K or 250K, if you're spending more than that amount of money, it has to be competitively bid.
Right.
Right. There are ways, and for instance, like contract vehicles or co-ops that are out there where solutions have been pre-bid.
Yeah.
Is that the only, possible path for, to I guess like I'd be curious your take on the co-ops and on some of the contract vehicles that exist. Do you have a point of view on how to use those? Yeah,
I mean, generally speaking, the bidding things out, it is threshold based, and the thresholds, again, this goes back to the formula.
Right.
Everyone's threshold is going to be different.
Yeah.
City of Detroit has a threshold, Wayne County has a threshold, State of Michigan has a threshold, Indiana has a threshold, and they're probably all different.
Yep.
25, 50, 75,000, 150,000, 500,000, like they're going to be everywhere. So know what those thresholds are.
Yep.
And as far as the cooperatives go, they can be really great. There's a cooperative that Michigan uses. It's called My Deal.
Yeah.
There's NASPO Value Point. There's a bunch of them out there. There's CoPro Plus, which is another one that's local here. And so, essentially, the co-ops satisfy the requirement that something, a product or service has been put out to bid. And that's, at the end of the day, it satisfies the law.
Yeah.
And so you can go out and you can say, okay, this was put out to bid. You still get to negotiate.
Wait, can I pause you there?
Yeah.
The reason why it satisfies the law is that the law will say the purchase needs to have been competitively bid.
Yes.
But it doesn't say that you necessarily need to have done the competitive bid yesterday. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
It's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I guess it could be looked at as a little bit of a loophole. But it's not a bad one.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with a co-op, because essentially what they did was, any public entity put something out for bid.
Right.
And if it's what you need, like office supplies, or maybe it's fire trucks or school buses or police cars or anything.
Yeah.
You still go back to that vendor and you say, hey, I want to use Indiana's co-op for fire trucks based in Michigan. And I'm like, okay, well, we can put our own kind of pricing together, and you can have your own contract, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, that framework has been competitively solicited.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
to tie that together, like you made the point about you want the vest that the police officers want. Mm-hmm. What should a partner? I'll use the term partner, not vendor. What should a partner do? And in your mind, like, what is the ideal sales cycle look like from where you sit in government, right? Like, because obviously the vest company would need to interact with the business units, the police, or the law enforcement team.
Yeah.
And then at some point, procurement's brought in, right? And you got to work with the procurement folks to navigate those steps as well. What does doing that perfectly look like? Because in theory, if you sequence those two things, right, you get all the way down the path to the place where the law enforcement folks say yes, you're our preferred choice, and then you kick off the procurement thing. That cycle time seems like it's stacked on each other. Is there a way to parallelize some of those stuff?
The way it kind of works is ideally the way it works is, say, let's use that vest example. Somebody from the state police would come and say, hey, we want to get a new vendor for our bulletproof vests, or we need to put it out to bid now. It's been 7 years.
Sure.
And we say, okay, well, let's look at the old bid. Let's see if it's still good. Let's dust it off. Let's look at the requirements again and put in your new requirements.
Yeah.
What do you want? What does it need to weigh? What's the the ballistic nature of it?
Sure. What tech contraptions does it have?
Right. Can it hang cameras and all that? And then so we'll take all that into account, and then we put it out on the street. And then so it'll sit on the street. So that might take a month.
Okay.
Right.
And so by that point, is your expectation that the law enforcement team has met with other vendors to kind of inform
so they
how
may
they're
have
thinking
and
about
they
it?
may not have. So that's a really good point. Procurement is there to help facilitate that if you don't know. So in a lot of cases, someone will come to procurement and they just know they want some kind of service, but they have no idea who can provide it or how.
Yeah.
And in other cases, they know exactly who can provide it, or they know that there's at least 2 or 3 that can do a good job. And so procurement can do a couple of things. They can say, all right, we'll work with the ones that you've identified and we'll put out to bid there. Or they'll go back and say, all right, well, we'll go find those vendors for you. That's part of the service that procurement can and should be able to provide.
Yeah.
That's a little bit more of a mature organization. I'd say your most mature organizations are a partner in that way to the internal stakeholder, where they're looked at as a subject matter expert in certain categories.
Right.
So they come to us and say, we don't actually know who makes the best bulletproof vests, and then procurement will go out and figure that out.
And just from my knowledge too, is procurement looking at contracts that are coming up for expiration or rebid, and they're proactively seeking these folks out some amount of time ahead of time?
You hope so.
So yeah, in a well-run, well-resourced, organization, what does that look like?
In a perfect world, you have your category. So procurement will be split up into categories, whatever they may be. Commodities, IT, whatever, right? You can have 6, you can have 3. It's up to you. But within there, you have the folks that work in those categories are category experts. So let's take IT, for example. The buyers in that category understand IT and their subset of IT. So you might have IT software, IT hardware.
Yeah.
They know their book of business, which is all of the contracts that entity has for IT hardware and or software. They know when it's coming up. They understand the technology. They follow it. So when that comes up, the IT team goes to them and they say, hey, this is up for bid. We need some servers, or we need Microsoft licensing. How do we do that? And that person knows. They already know that it's coming up. They may be the ones that are proactively saying, hey, this is going to be expiring in 18 months. We need to start working on this now.
Yeah.
Right. And to answer your question from earlier, what's the ideal timeline? You're talking 9 to 12 months for larger bids. And I'm talking about full RFPs. It's getting quotes is different. It's a couple of months. But a real full-blown bid is going to be 9 to 12 months.
9 to 12 months of work before it hits the street.
No, that's what we call rec to check.
Oh, rec to check.
From the time that it goes in to when you've got a signed, fully executed document.
Got it.
And
how much time before the RFP hits the street? I mean, this is an impossible question to answer, but is there any, patterns that you can point to there? If an RFP drops tomorrow, how long are folks working on it before?
It depends. 30, 60 days, probably a good timeline.
Yeah.
It can be more. So there's so much nuance in there, as you can imagine. you might have a procurement team that sends it over to the customer and says, hey, I built 50% of this statement of work. I need you to fill out the rest. And they might take 3 months before they get back to us.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So, but generally, you want that done in 30 to 60 days and get it ready to hit the street. Okay.
And then I want to also go back to one thing you said too, where if the, I'll call it the business user, comes to procurement and they know exactly what they want. 2 scenarios. Scenario 1, they know exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Which vest they want. Or the scenario where they don't and they want to do some research on it. First of all, does procurement care which of those 2 paths? Is there does procurement care or prefer one of the 2?
I mean, you might have some that do. I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I really I listen to the customer.
Yeah,
and
it's back to customer service.
If they come back to me with 3 and I think that there's 4, I might push back and say, hey, we should include this 4th one. I think they could do the job. They might disagree.
Yeah.
But I might say, well, we're going to add them anyway.
Yeah.
Let's just see what they say, because it doesn't really hurt anything.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you can have a little bit of friction there where they don't feel like they should include certain ones, or there are some cases where the customer might say there's only one company that can do this, and this is why. And they might be right.
Yeah.
I never discount that flat out. Although it does kind of lead to, okay, you're just trying to get business to this one company.
Yeah.
So you got to be really wary of that, especially in public sector, right? You can't be putting out bids that are specifically written so only one vendor can win it.
Right.
You have to make them specific enough to get the product you want, but not so specific that you're
There's only one.
disqualifying everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. So
if that did happen, I mean, I'm sure that's happened before.
Sure.
But if that did happen, who's accountable for that at the end of the day? Because it could be protested, right?
Yep, it can
so
be.
what would happen is that bid comes out, someone, vendor B who feels that vendor A was advantaged, vendor B, what do? They protest the procurement.
yes.
And then what happens?
So it depends. Sometimes the protest will be denied based
By whom?
on
By procurement?
and by the business,
Okay.
in tandem.
And
right?
does
So-
legal get involved in that too?
Yes, usually
Okay.
they do.
Yeah.
In a well-rounded organization, you're pulling in legal.
Sure.
And then of course you inform your leadership team, hey, this happened and this is what's going on.
Yeah.
But sometimes the protest is valid, and what you do is you cancel the bid and you start over again.
Okay.
And it's hard to say who's to blame, right? If that sort of thing happens, it's not usually any one person or any one entity, right? So procurement may not have enough of an understanding to know that was what was going on.
Yeah, that this phrase blocked everyone out.
Right, and
Yeah.
we may not know that because we're not always the subject matter expert.
Sure.
So you could say, well, it was the business's fault.
Yeah.
And maybe it was, but for me, it's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Okay, it happened. Let's make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Let's make it right. Let's put it back out on the street without that language, and we start over again.
And does that? I mean, this is maybe a tough one, but I'm just curious. What are the vibes of people internally then? Are folks ooh, we're angry at vendor B? How maybe a way to ask the question is how often is vendor B then awarded? Do you have any idea?
If they're the ones that protested,
Yeah.
and if they were correct,
Yeah. Do they have an increased chance? Do they have a decreased chance of winning? Or,
it's the same, because procurement, we're always neutral, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a misnomer a little bit, that
They've got
on
some axe to
someone's
grind.
side.
Right.
I don't care at all.
Yeah.
You
need the thing to get fulfilled well at the right price and follow the laws and the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care if Bob's bulletproof vest or, Larry's bulletproof vest wins. I don't have a.
Yeah.
To me, it's is this the best value for our constituents?
Yeah.
Is this the best way to spend taxpayer money? And is it the safest, for the end user, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But the vibes. So from a procurement perspective, whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe on the business side, they might be pretty
Yeah,
annoyed
yeah.
with them. But we oversee the scoring and we oversee so we try to make sure that there's not any like untoward behavior in there. That's the other part that we play in this.
So talk to me for just a moment about the scoring.
Yeah.
Like, how are those committees formed? Is that a policy somewhere about how the committees get formed?
Yeah, it is. It depends on the entity, but the policy can be really prescriptive, or it can just be you need to have a committee.
Yeah.
And that's the whole sentence, and
Okay.
that's the end of it. The committees are generally the end users. Somebody from procurement will preside, but not usually score. But they'll be the ones to set up the meetings, the cadence, and then concatenate all of the data into, like, everyone scores into a single, unifying document, and make sure that you have representation from the business. Maybe someone from the leadership team wants to be on there.
Yeah.
It depends on the project who's on the scoring team.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
And is it usually what, like 3 to 5 people?
Yeah,
typically?
about 3 to 5, maybe more.
Okay.
You don't want too many, because then
Yeah.
you get too many cooks in the kitchen and it never gets done.
Yeah.
And you end up in a roundtable discussion about a single sentence for 3 hours.
And mechanically, like, are those, so like I've seen some of these scoring and evaluation sheets where, person A, person B, person C, D, and then there's, 5 dimensions.
Yep.
Performance, feature set, price, whatever.
Yeah.
And they each evaluate them. Is it like a cut and dry thing? Or if the person A is like the leader, does their opinion carry more weight, or is it like straight averaged across?
Everybody's opinion carries the same weight internally. Now, the scorecard usually is weighted. So this is where I have seen the private sector fall down completely. So the public sector has to have these scorecards, and they need to be publicly available. So the Freedom of Information Act is, or FOIA as we call it, is a valuable tool for somebody. So you can FOIA the scorecard.
Yeah.
And you can say, hey, I want to see how I stacked up and why.
Yeah.
But in the private sector, that's not always the case.
Good luck FOIAing the scorecard.
There isn't one, usually. Right. There might be, but a lot of it's just conversations and vibes.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, I like this guy. I don't know, his price is the yada, yada, yada. Okay. Now let's go with Bob.
Yep.
And then that's the end of it. But you can't do that in the public sector.
Yeah.
The scorecards, generally speaking, again, entity dependent, are weighted. So you'll have, like you said, 5 categories. And each one will, of course, they'll all equal up to 100%. But let's say ability to execute might be weighted like 50%, because that's incredibly important.
Right.
So those categories might have a different weighting and importance, but the people scoring it, whether it's the CEO or the analyst that is going to be like helping implement it, their score weighs the same.
Yeah. Okay. So if they're on the committee, their score weighs the same.
Yep.
Got it. Makes sense. I do want to go back to something that you mentioned earlier in the conversation around just kind of the fact that in public sector there are more steps and there are more reviews / approvals. You had touched on before, I know we've talked about this, like the goals around getting small business or diverse businesses, making sure that they have a fair shot at the table. And I've heard you mention that sometimes those two realities conflict.
Yeah.
How do people reconcile that, right? Because you do read a lot about how there's even at the federal government, we want to work with small business.
Yeah.
Small business really matters. How do you square that?
It's tough. The larger,
is it doable? Can you do it
for a small business to do
for a
business?
government to like really be able to flexibly work with small business?
Yes, it is possible. It depends on the service that's being provided, and it depends on like the scale of it. One thing that I've noticed is, the larger the project, the harder it is for a smaller business to get involved. So if you're a small business trying to do business with let's say a state level, you need to be able to provide state level services. Right. So
similar size and scope.
Right. Well, I use an example of like janitorial service, right? So the state of Indiana or California or Michigan might put out a bid for janitorial services for various facilities around the state that are owned. Well, the bid might call for a single vendor to be able to service all of those facilities. that can be really, really difficult for a small business
Right.
to do. So as a small business, you might think, all right, well, I can service a quarter of these.
Yeah.
Maybe there's 3 others that I can partner with. And between the 4 of us, we can put a single bid together that will cover the entire state.
Yeah.
A lot of times that's a good way to do it. So if you're
Okay.
a small business, look for partners.
Huh.
Also look to be subcontractor. So a lot of bids go out now, especially in the construction space,
Yeah.
where there are subcontractor requirements, especially when it applies to minority, women-owned, veteran-owned businesses, where they'll say a certain percentage of your subs need to be that.
Yeah.
And that's much more prevalent now in local government, not so much federal,
Yeah.
because the laws changed. So, but locally, like that's another way to look at things. Like if you can be a subcontractor to a bigger company, go to them. So follow the bids that are out
Yeah.
there, where they're going, and reach out to the big dogs that you know. Because if you're in that space, you know.
Yeah.
Your CBRE or
course,
your,
yeah.
like these big construction companies that are going to be responding to these large scale construction and be like, hey, I noticed in this bid, like you need 10% of your people.
For XYZ service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a minority owned business and I do, waste removal.
Yeah.
Put me in there.
Yeah.
I'll be your guy.
Teaming makes a ton of sense. I wonder, in that first example you gave, if so let's do the janitorial thing, and let's say that you got to cover the whole state of Michigan, and so there's a company that takes the Upper Peninsula, and then 3 companies divide the mitten.
Yeah.
And so so then they put together a bid. They get it in before 4 o'clock and dot all the I's and cross all the T's.
Yeah.
When it comes time to look at things like past performance and ability to deliver, like past performance, I'm sure might be different across those 4 companies
Sure.
who banded together to put the bid together.
Yeah.
Right. Their ability to deliver, seems like it would be, sensible to be like, there's not going to be the proverbial one throat to choke.
Right.
Unless they came up with some smart way to put that into the bid. But like, do you worry about those things? Like, do those things seem like they would put that entity or that bidder at a disadvantage, or am I not thinking about it the right way?
I mean, yes and no. We worry about it a little bit, but there's ways you can ask those questions and you can get references. So like,
Yeah.
you might not be calling one company for reference, you'll be calling 4 or
sure.
3, right?
Yeah.
And so we asked for that, and each company would give their history and how long they've been around, and
Right.
We as the entity would do our due diligence
Yeah.
and figure all that out.
Yeah.
That's another part of what procurement provides.
Yeah,
is
right.
to
They're
do
able to-
that and to ensure that we feel good about doing that for the company. But like when you look at say Wayne County or City of Detroit, there's also that want to do business.
Right.
With small minority-owned, women-owned,
Local,
veteran-owned businesses,
right.
Local businesses. So when we see bids come in like that, there's a little bit of this is great.
You try to make it work.
We try to make it work.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
One thing I'm curious, I've heard others mention is, we talked even about procurement policy and procurement code or law. I've heard folks say like it would be there are some changes that could be made. Like, so for instance, if a county of this size has a procurement law or code that looks like this, and then there's other counties that have similar size and budgets and complexity, but their procurement code is, let's say it's simpler. What does it take for one of the more complex procurement rule place to revise their code? I've heard folks say like sometimes it can be done through administrative action, sometimes it has to be elected officials have to sign off on it. Do you have a view of what that would take?
I mean, for the most part, it's going to be a change in the law.
Yeah.
So that's not a small feat.
Yeah.
So I think a couple things you want to do there is have established positive relationships with your local, your elected officials that oversee this, and present to them good data around like here's what is going on because the law is written the way it is, and here's some hard numbers of like it takes us this long to do it, and this is the tail of the approvals for the different committees and this, that, and the other. And if we change it to this, here's what you'll see. but here's what the timelines that'll be better.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, having them understand that you being procurement, you're not doing it for procurement really.
Yeah.
Because when we are waiting for those approvals, we're not really doing anything.
Yeah.
We've moved on to other tasks.
Yeah.
That's just something that's going on in the background.
Right.
It's for the suppliers.
Right.
Right. It's for the folks that want to do business with the county.
Yeah.
It's really for them.
Yeah.
So like in positioning things that way and say, hey, if we change the law to do this, what do you think?
Yeah.
And work with them and partner with them, because you have to present the data.
For sure. I could only imagine it'd have to be a pretty strong case. But so is that theoretically, of course, would that be procurement working with, the city manager or the mayor?
Like
mechanically, what would someone do?
At Wayne County, it would be working with the county commission. So there's several commissioners representing all the various communities within Wayne County.
Yep.
And so you're going to want to talk to them and the commission chair and their legal counsel and other folks.
But this is procurement doing that.
It's procurement doing that in tandem with the executive office.
Okay.
And this is not something that we would do in a bubble at Wayne County. And so it's kind of an all hands on deck. Everybody knows what's going on.
Yeah.
We're working together. And all for the greater good.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And at the state level, there's a state administrative board, so you would work with them.
Yeah.
And talk to them about how you'd want to change it. Very similar to the way Wayne County. I don't 100% know how City of Detroit does it. I don't work in the City of Detroit, but I know the director there, and she's phenomenal. So maybe you could have her on next and talk about Detroit. Yeah.
So I do want to make sure I ask you about the state of Michigan work that you did.
Sure.
Because if I have my memory straight, you guys did a really phenomenal job there. I think you were when you started, Michigan was 9th in the country, and it was when your team was through there, you were first.
Yeah.
What did that look like? What did you change? What do you think you were able to improve?
So that was people and process, right? So back to that triangle: people, process, technology.
Yeah.
When I got there, the technology was already there. It was like it had just been implemented. It was like being implemented, and it was fine.
Which technology was?
A company or a product called CGI.
Okay.
It's like an Oracle-like software that some governments use it. It's not bad. It's fine. And so, but we had a process problem and a people problem. So we had really low morale. The folks in the department were leaving at a huge rate.
Okay.
Because what they were finding was they could leave that procurement office and go to another agency. And by agency, I mean like the Department of Natural Resources or the state police or parks, different places like that, Health and Human Services.
Yeah.
They could make the same or more money and do 50% of the work.
Got it.
So like, I don't need this.
That's tough.
Life, right? I don't blame them.
Yeah.
So, and then we had a few bad apples in the organization that were kind of dragging things down. So, first thing I did was I came in and I talked to everybody one-on-one. And so I had an all hands meeting on my first day, and I introduced myself and talked about my dog and my life.
Yeah.
And I said, look, first of all, I have an open door, so you come talk to me anytime you want. And I'm still very passionate about that. Like, if you're in my organization, if I walk by your office and your door's shut and you're not on the phone or something, I'm just going to open your door.
Yeah.
Like that. I don't want to see that.
I love that.
I don't want to see that. Like you need to be available for your staff.
Yeah.
Right? And the second thing was I said, I'm going to sit down with each and every one of you, and I just want to get to know you. And that's true. But when you do that, folks, they open up a little bit about work too.
Yeah.
So we talked about people's families and their pets and their kids and their hobbies and interests, and also what's going on here.
Yeah.
Right. And a couple things I noticed without getting like too into the nitty gritty. It was a lot of like middle management mismanagement, and basically the signals going up and the signals going down were completely garbled in the middle.
Telephone game.
Yeah, and causing mass frustration.
Yeah.
And then I went and sat with all the customers. I went to the directors of every single agency.
Okay.
There's like 26, I think now.
Okay. By the way, how many people on the procurement team?
At that time, it was about 55.
Okay.
Now there, I think, are about 70.
Okay.
So that the team's
So
expanded.
55 one-on-ones with
Yes.
the team plus 26 one-on-ones or however many there were at the time.
Yeah,
with
so I
the
did like a
department
little
heads.
road show, like
Yeah.
a one-man, two-man road show. I had
Yeah.
a deputy that I brought with me and another guy that was like really just a phenomenal
Yeah.
partner.
How long did that take?
Months.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
And I could imagine. I don't want to interrupt you, but I can
No.
imagine a lot of people are like, they know that they should do that, but then they're like, it's gonna take a long time.
Yeah.
How'd you justify it?
It's the only way to know what's going on.
Yeah.
Like it.
Like you couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
In your view.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was brought in to fix a broken organization that had started and stopped a transformation multiple times, and it was completely stalled. And like I said, the attrition was
Tough.
double
Yeah,
digits,
yeah.
like just outrageous. And there was no data, there was no nothing. It was just a mess. So I'm like, well, I got to get to the bottom of this. So what do? You got to talk to the people.
Totally.
So I talked to everybody internally. I got some great intel, great relationship building, and then building trust. Right, I'm here for the long haul. I'm here for you. I'm here to help you, and then out to the customer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's going on? Procurement's too slow. I know, right?
Right.
I've heard that. I should probably put that on my tombstone.
Yeah.
Here lies Jim Colangelo. Procurement's too slow. It will be forever, right? But outside of that, like, what about it is too slow?
Yeah.
Like, what do you hate?
Yeah.
And so I got some really good insights there. And honestly, from there, I was able to build the transformation plan.
Yeah.
There was a plan that existed, and what we did is I had an offsite with about 3 or 4 folks. And I said, let's look at this plan that exists now and let's strip it down. We're talking about like, how many meetings do we have a week? Well, we have like 8 meetings a week about this. How about 1?
Yep.
Right? So let's strip all that out.
Amen to that, man.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, just come on. Hour-long meetings, how about 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Right? So then taking this massively complicated transformation plan and just breaking it down into really like bite-sized chunks.
Yeah.
Contract management, education, supplier relationship management, and then category management. Who's running these categories? And then looking at the org structure, right? Who's in charge? How many layers do I have? Way too many layers.
Totally.
Let's collapse those. And then also we had an entire, like 50% of the staff was not doing sourcing work. They were doing all of the work that is required to support sourcing, responding to FOIAs, dealing with risk, all the risk assessments of our suppliers, insurance requirements, like that was all in the office. Training, technology, and reporting, right?
Yeah.
Who was doing the reporting? Who was building our reports? When someone would ask for spend data, we couldn't get it.
Right.
Like, what do we spend on IT? I don't know.
Yeah. So it blows up. Anyone who asked the question now, it takes 3 days to do it, and all the things that they were working on before slid back 3 days.
Right.
Yeah.
So we had this whole, like, I would say, and I don't mean this derogatory, in a derogatory way, the back office people. So it's like, no, they aren't back office. That team, to go all the way back to the JetBlue conversation, that's the customer experience team.
Yeah.
So I split it into 2 pieces. I had the sourcing team and the customer experience team, and they were at equal footing. So this back office team that used to be kind of a redheaded stepchild, treated not with a lot of respect for the work they did, were now elevated.
Yeah.
And like, this is really important work. And then I put some directors in place, put some managers in place, gave them folks that could do the job based on their interests, based on the conversations I had with all of them earlier on. So it's like that like, your people, right, are I'm stealing this from somebody, are your only appreciating asset in the company, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're the core and the foundation of everything. It's like they guided me.
Totally.
It's not like I just had an epiphany one day. It was just like, no, this is what is needed in this organization. This is what works here.
Yeah.
This is what I learned at JetBlue or at AAA or Federal Mogul or all these places that I worked before. But you take all that and you just kind of blend it. But what works in one organization is not always a great fit for another one. So you have to really, get down and get your hands dirty, roll your sleeves up, and then eventually it all starts to click, falls into place, and you can go to work every day, put your feet up on your desk, light a cigar, and be like, "This is great.
What's happening?
Everything's working great.
Yeah,
I don't have
right.
to do anything."
I've
Right?
never been there, by the way.
You'll get there.
I love that story. It's such an unbelievable. There's so many good principles about leadership and about management and execution that drop out of there. I love the point about simplifying the requirements.
Yeah.
I think there's a quote that I heard one time. Every complex organization began as a simple organization, right? Like there's not an example in the world of or organism, I should say. There's not an example in the world of a complex organism or organization that began complicated. But I think to your point, like breaking it down into the little chunks and then landing them, it also gives people confidence that like we can do this.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And you have those wins, right? And you say, okay, like a small example of that would be when we started tracking metrics. We started with 4 different metrics of like cost savings. How much are we saving the state of Michigan every year?
Yeah.
What's our customer experience score?
Yeah.
We started tracking customer service, and we would score ourselves.
Yeah.
Or no, we wouldn't score. We would receive scores for ourselves from the customer. The customer being suppliers and the stakeholders. We had both metrics. We started with 4, and now there's probably 40 different metrics that are measured. But I'm a very big like proponent of decomplicating things. It's like people love, I think, to complicate things because it makes it seem like it's more important.
Yeah.
But there's really no reason for it. I learned a long time ago, and it was in a contracting class when I was like really green and going to like these legal courses about how to like frame contracts and write contracts and stuff. And someone had said to me, I worked for a law firm in New York for a while doing procurement, and one of the partners was like, if I can't read through this contract and understand it as a non-attorney, as a regular person, if I can't understand it, it's garbage.
Yeah.
Like if it's full of legalese and it's full of things, it's trash.
Yep.
And I feel the same about almost anything in life.
100%.
If it cannot be understood by a reasonably intelligent person, what you're doing is junk.
Totally. I
Which
love
sounds
that.
kind of harsh, but I don't.
I love that. It takes courage, I think, to be able to do that because I think a lot of times people feel like that, if they present a plan that's simple, someone might say, that's it? Like, that seems easy. Get it done tomorrow, and complicated things can sound nice. But I agree. That's one of the things I think, we at Pursuit, we've tried to hire people who think like they're simplifiers.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
2 closing questions I wanted to ask you.
Sure.
One is, with all the stuff happening in AI, it's kind of wild. I'm curious, like in your mind's eye, what do you hope changes? What do you hope stays the same?
I hope that I'll take the stays the same part, that the human element of the work that we do remains.
Yeah.
And I am hopeful that it will.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk, I think, around AI taking people's jobs, and I think that's really overblown.
Yeah.
My own opinion.
Yeah.
I think that you always are going to need human beings to help AI navigate the human world.
Yeah.
Right. What I hope changes is that AI provides us the tools necessary to do our jobs better and more quickly and more efficiently. So maybe we have more time to do more enjoyable things than work.
Yeah.
So, things that may have taken us 6 or 8 hours might take us 2 or 3.
Right.
And I'll take a procurement example for you. AI is being used right now, at least in the space I'm in writing statements of work. And so you can feed into the AI the 10 bids that came before for those vests, and you can plug in and say, here's the 10 old bids, here's the new requirements that we have, make me a whole new one.
Right.
And it'll do it in 15 seconds or less.
Yeah.
And then you go over it and you have to read it because there'll be some nonsense in there.
Sure.
But at least it'll get you, that's a whole day's worth of work.
100%.
Maybe
And by the
more.
way, that answer that you got today is the worst version of that you will get for the rest of your life because the AI is going to keep getting better.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that is a lot of leverage that can come. Cool. Yeah, that's interesting. What do you know what program that is that people are using? Was it just ChatGPT or
No. There's a. I'm working with a guy at a company right now It's called Forge Lab, and he builds this AI technology from scratch.
Cool.
And what it does is feed out of all the different AIs. So it goes out and grabs that information. So
you get kind of a best of all the
best
worlds.
of breed,
Yeah. Okay. Closing question I had.
Yes.
Like one of the objectives of Pursuit is to make it easier to work with state and local government, education.
Yes.
One thing I'd love to get your take on is for a company that has not historically worked with government, but they would like to. What would your number one recommendation to them be?
So pick the governments you want to work for. So go on their websites and register in their procurement system. That's step one.
Okay.
Put in all of your information that says, okay, and then put in like the categories and the codes and things. They're all going to have this of what you serve. Because when the bids go out, essentially what will happen is the buyer, whoever's doing it, will click the codes of, and then out it goes, and you'll get notified. So that's the first thing. Second thing is find the procurement director or deputy director or the manager of the category. So for you, IT. Find that IT manager and just set up a meeting. And be like, hey, I just want to come talk to you. That's a huge part of what procurement does. We're there to find new suppliers, new partners, and establish those relationships. If they say no, you probably don't want to work with them. No, they're not going to say no.
Great point. I mean, I think what you're saying is it is their job to say yes, and if for some reason they're too busy and they can't do it for a while, maybe that's a signal that not a great fit either.
Maybe, but they might also say, you know what, we have a bid on the street right now for something similar to what you provide. I can't talk to you.
For sure.
Which is fair, right? So it's that whole fair and impartial thing you can't have conversations about. But they'll take the meeting and just get to know them. And then once you have that, you can check in with them every couple months. Hey, how's it going?
For sure.
Got any bids out for this? Anything coming up? One thing I can caution you against is doing a runaround of procurement. So this is the bane of our existence, is when a supplier will go to, say, a CFO or even the elected officials and be like, hey, I think you need this. And that's where you run into the whole like, oh, I'm getting a statement of work from the customer that is specifically written for this company.
One person.
And that's when our red flags and antenna go up and we're like, right? And so we'll push back on that sort of thing. So it's better to start with procurement than around them.
And you feel like there's the need, it sounds like you're saying there doesn't even need to be a specific opportunity in mind to set that up. It's kind of like, just would love to meet you, Jim, and learn a little bit about... I just want to establish
a relationship. I'm trying to get in the government sector. I want to know more about what you're buying. Here's what I know. And do your homework about the entity. You know, City of Detroit, Wayne County, State of Michigan. And those people usually know someone, and they'll be like, oh, you know what? I think so-and-so would want to talk to you. I'll send an email out to you. Or you should talk to this person. And that way you kind of establish those relationships.
I love that. That's simple, just like you described. And it's a formula, easy to follow. If you just do the steps, it'll work out.
That's right.
This was great. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for making the time.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
Coming by.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.